Greetings. My name is Chase Robinson, and I'm the Dame Gillian Sackler Director of the Arthur M. Sackler Gallery and the Freer Gallery of Art, which together constitute the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. Conjoined physically and unified administratively, the galleries are dedicated to increasing our understanding of the arts and cultures of Asia through a broad portfolio of exhibitions, publications, conservation, research, education, and events. At the Freer and Sackler, we have the great privilege of holding the nation's trust as the Smithsonian's first museum dedicated to the arts. The Freer Gallery of Art, founded by a visionary eponym, Charles Lang Freer, opened to the public in 1923 in the National Mall, right next to the Smithsonian Castle. Together with the Arthur M. Sackler Gallery, added in 1987, the Freer and Sackler have grown to become not just complementary galleries, but a national resource for Asian arts in the United States. Growth is what animates us as we approach our 100th anniversary in 2023. Growth not only for our extraordinary collections, not only for the deep and broad expertise of our staff, but growth first and foremost in how we orient our local and global audiences to the diverse artistic traditions of Asia, for cultivating a passion for discovery of the world and indeed of the self, and for nurturing empathy and understanding. Even in today's very trying circumstances, we advance our mission to educate and inspire local and global audiences. As our physical doors are closed, our digital initiatives and online content keep the museum open and, moreover, help reinvent our engagement, enabling us to reach unprecedented numbers of virtual visitors from around the world. As many of you watching will know, our museum has one of the world's finest holdings of Asian art. Some 44,000 objects range from the Near East through South and Southeast Asia to East Asia, and from the Neolithic period to the 21st century. The ancient Near East was home to several of the world's oldest civilizations. Today, few museums of Asian art can boast collections of Near Eastern art as rich as those of the Freer and Sackler. With more than 3,000 objects spanning from 5500 BCE to the advent of Islam, the Freer and Sackler galleries display the creativity and inventiveness of ancient civilizations. Islamic art, or arts of the Islamic world, refer to a variety of artistic traditions that have flourished in a vast geographic region, from southern Spain and North Africa to the islands of Southeast Asia, since the 7th century. The Freer and Sackler together hold one of the country's finest collections of the arts of the Islamic world, with particular strengths in illustrated manuscripts and ceramics, those featuring among more than 2,200 objects. The arts of South Asia and the Himalayas are closely intertwined with the subcontinent's many religious traditions. With more than 1,200 objects, our museum's South Asian and Himalayan collections illuminate richly diverse sacred traditions, Hindu, Jain, Buddhist, and Islamic, as well as the secular arts of the Mughal and Rajput courts. The Freer and Sackler possess one of the finest museum collections of Chinese art in the world, with more than 13,000 objects dating from Neolithic times to the present. In addition to numerous masterworks, holdings powerfully reflect all major periods and materials of artistic production. Special strengths include imperial and trade ceramics, classical paintings and calligraphy, and our remarkable ancient jades and bronzes, to which I'll be returning shortly. Comprising close to 900 objects, the Freer and Sackler's Southeast Asian collections range from Buddhist and Hindu sculpture in stone and bronze to gold jewelry and ceramics from Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar. Our Southeast Asian artworks feature typically innovative forms that blend local and imported traditions. When the Freer Gallery of Art opened its doors in 1923, Freer's assembly of Korean art was unparalleled in quality and historical scope. The simple forms, spare decoration, and monochrome glazes of Joseon period tea bowls first attracted Charles Lang Freer to Korean ceramics. He expanded his collection to include Goryeo dynasty celadons and rare examples of exquisite Buddhist paintings. Charles Lang Freer's first Asian art purchase was Japanese. He was inspired by the beauty of Japanese paintings, ceramics, and sculpture, and acquired a remarkable number of masterpieces, such as these iconic screens by Sotatsu and the world's largest collection of paintings and drawings by Hokusai. When Freer bequeathed his collection to the United States, more than 2,000 Japanese works were included in his gift. From this foundation, the Freer Gallery's collection has grown in size and scope to include calligraphy, lacquer, prints, and printed books. Japanese art in the Sackler Gallery added more exceptional objects across media, with a focus on modern and contemporary works. In total, the Freer and Sackler's Japanese art collections comprise more than 12,000 objects spanning 4 millennia. Whether drawing upon traditional Asian aesthetic and cultural traditions or new media concepts and practices, many Asian artists are playing a critical role in redefining our understanding of Asia and the development of global contemporary art. The Contemporary Asian Art Program at the Freer and Sackler encourages new and provocative ways of thinking about Asian art and Asian culture. Since the 1990s, our museum has hosted in the Sackler Gallery groundbreaking exhibitions and programs of modern and contemporary Asian art. Now that I've had the chance and the pleasure of giving a very brief overview of our exceptional collections, let me take a step back and speak to the impact that we have as the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. We're committed to fostering understanding and respect and to generating empathy. Cross-cultural connections are key to our project. They are at the core of many of our objects, the foundation upon which our collections were built, and a guiding principle for our visitors as they discover the arts and cultures of Asia. Our museum has a long and rich history of cross-cultural dialogue. That history harkens back to museum founder Charles Lang Freer, who traveled extensively in Turkey, Egypt, Syria, India, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Singapore, Hong Kong, China, and Japan, all while cultivating meaningful friendships with dealers and collectors throughout Asia. A significant episode in this history is the collaboration of the Freer Gallery of Art with Tsinghua University in Beijing from 1925 to 1928. The Freer provided all the necessary funds for archaeological excavations. Those excavations were to be supervised by the Chinese institution, the Tsinghua University, and all excavated objects were to remain in China. The Freer was to receive an English language report for publication. 2 seasons of scientific archaeological excavations were conducted, the second of which was the extraordinarily consequential archaeological work began in 1928 of the Shang capital of Anyang in the Henan province. Li Qi, China's first Western-trained archaeologist, was a member of the Freer Gallery of Art field staff and was appointed in 1928 the head of the Institute of Archaeology, the then newly established Academia Sinica. This was a momentous collaboration that greatly advanced scholarship in the field of Chinese archaeology. Most recently, our museum engaged in a different project entailing international collaborations and cross-cultural dialogue. I'm referring to the very popular international loan exhibition, Empresses of China's Forbidden City, 1644 to 1912, co-curated by our Melvin R. Seiden Curator of Chinese Art, Jan Stewart, in collaboration with her colleagues at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, and the Palace Museum in Beijing. Featuring artworks from the Palace Museum that had never before been exhibited outside of China, the exhibition was the first ever in-depth exhibition on the lives of Qing Dynasty empresses, offering a compelling tale of the influence that these women exerted in the arts, religion, politics, and diplomacy. The exhibition traveled from Salem, Massachusetts to Washington, D.C., where in our galleries it contributed significantly, became one of the highest rated exhibitions in our recent history. While our bylaws bind us to displaying our Freer Gallery objects only within the Freer Gallery, our Sackler Gallery and collections allow us to engage in national and international loan projects. Empresses of China is a testament to the success of such collaborations. I can't tell you about the extent to which cross-cultural connections are at the core of our identity without saying something about our glorious Peacock Room. Charles Lang Freer, a Detroit businessman, began collecting works by living American artists in the 1880s. Over his lifetime, he acquired significant works by many Gilded Age artists, such as Dwight Tryon, Thomas Dewing, Abbott Thayer, John Singer Sargent, and Winslow Homer. In 1890, he met James McNeill Whistler, whose style had been influenced by Japanese prints and Chinese ceramics. Freer's collection, now in our museum, features an unparalleled selection of Whistler's work, including the famous Peacock Room. A distinctly late 19th century American experience forged the vision for the Freer Gallery of Art. Merely one aspect was the Cornish New Hampshire of the 1890s, that colony and laboratory of creativity that brought the architect, Charles Platt, together with Freer, and that attracted visual artists the likes of Dewing, St. Gaudens, and Metcalfe, and patrons too, writers and public figures such as Winston Churchill and Woodrow Wilson. Adventurous and creative, Freer exemplifies our national myth of ingenuity and individualism. But the history of America is a history of global connectedness. Freer's collection, accordingly, narrates a story that is at once distinctively American and thoroughly global. The Whistler who introduced Freer to Japanese visual culture was the expat Whistler who, living in Paris and London, engaged culture as it was refracted through the metropolitan lens of global empires. Japanism was much the product of this historical moment. And it's but one example of the wide-ranging influence that Asian visual culture exercised upon European and North American modernism, a story that has chapters featuring the likes of Whistler, Degas, Monet, and Pound. As a collector, Freer's journey to East Asia ran through an American immigrant plugged into global networks of inspiration and influence. Visitors to our museum can make journeys of their own. In that spirit, I invite you to embark on a virtual journey to the Peacock Room by watching an excerpt from our recent online program on the topic, part of a new series entitled Tea and Conversation. Join me in marveling at the Peacock Room while listening to an expert conversation between Jan Stewart, Curator of Chinese Art, Carrie Roeder, Curatorial Fellow in American Art.
In May 2019, the room reopened, fully installed with blue and white, for the first time since it was in London. Once a month, on the third Thursday, the shutters in the Peacock Room are opened up, flooding the room with natural light and allowing you to see the colors and surfaces in a whole new way. Next slide. Looking out these windows, you can see the garden path that runs along the side of the Freer. This view also harkens back to Leyland's dining room in Prince's Gate, which similarly looked out over a park. With the shutters open, depending on the outside weather and the time of day, you might have an entirely different experience of the room. It is truly, as Whistler proclaimed, a gorgeous surprise.
So a final look at what I would say is dangerously addictive porcelain. Here you see on the left a wall installed with our new reproductions. And we have a close-up of one of the platters that was very much loved in Europe. The Europeans love these large chargers or platters. The birds here are peacocks, a lovely little ironic touch. And the density of the design, this appealed so much to Europeans. But the flowers, these are lotus petals. They're all kinds of the lapettes are lotus petals, all kinds of decoration that is Chinese. So I want to just point out, when we talk about Chinese Kangxi blue and white, sometimes it's called export blue and white. It's blue and white that was made, it was exported to many different markets and had slightly different tastes for each market. It also had its own kind of domestic use, complicated.
So someone asked, what happened to the ceramics that Freer installed in the Peacock Room? Are they in the Freer's permanent collection?
Yes, they're very much in Freer's permanent collection. And they are very, very safely tucked away in storage. And they will come back. One of the wonderful things about our vision, our current vision of the Peacock Room, is that it is two things. It is Whistler and Leyland's Peacock Room, and it is also Charles Lang Freer's Peacock Room. So we do have plans to sometimes take all the blue and white off and put back the ceramics that we know Freer collected for these shelves.
I do hope you enjoyed that taste of our museum as much as I did. I'd like to continue to explore our museum's range of cross-cultural connections by drawing your attention to two exceptional objects in our collection. These two canteens are strikingly similar in shape, despite their different media. One is porcelain, the other metalwork. They're also strikingly different in period and culture. One is Ayyubid period Syrian or northern Mesopotamian, the other Ming Dynasty Chinese. Their similar shapes testifying to the global circulation of cultural motifs and practices, and their similarly stunning craftsmanship are not their only commonalities. Perhaps even more powerful link is the multicultural and cross-cultural character of their decorative programs. Let's spend a few moments beholding the multicultural masterpiece that is the Freer Canteen, a 13th century metalwork monument to Frankish, Eastern Christian, and Islamic shared culture. A single example from our collection of 44,000 pieces, the Freer Canteen is utterly unique, a remarkable illustration of the craftsmanship that made medieval Mosul the world's leading center of metalwork, as well as an important center of Christian and Muslim exchange. The only known example of its kind from the Islamic world, the canteen recalls the shape of pilgrim flasks. Its inlaid silver decoration combines calligraphy and decorative motifs, such as intricate geometric designs and lively animal scrolls. It combines all that with distinctly Christian imagery. And this includes representation of the Virgin and Child in the center, surrounded by narrative scenes from the life of Christ, as well as saints and knights. It's been suggested that the canteen may have been commissioned by a wealthy Christian, perhaps as a special memento of his travels. Now, the large flat expanses and sharp angles natural to a metal shape are difficult to translate into porcelain clay, which, when so forced, tends to warp and crack during firing. This porcelain canteen is exceptional in how it overcomes the limitations of its own medium. Part of the family of blue and white ceramics, which so inspired Whistler, this canteen may have been made for a Chinese clientele fascinated by the shapes and forms of Islamic metalwork. The hybrid decoration of this canteen combines waves, a common Chinese motif, Chinese floral scrolls that seem to reflect awareness of Islamic arabesques, and an Islamic 8-pointed star on the central boss. Like its metal counterpart, The back of this porcelain canteen bears a socket, but it's uncertain whether this ceramic vessel, far heavier than the metal version, was ever used. It may have been a purely ornamental piece, and the same could be speculated about the remarkable massive friar canteen itself. Examined together, these canteens shed light on the fascinating tale of blue and white porcelain, a tale of cross-cultural trade and aesthetic exchange encompassing the circulation of technologies, pigments, and designs between China and West Asia, other regions of East Asia, South and Southeast Asia, and even Europe and the United States. Within and beyond the tale they tell, these canteens are highlights of our collections, objects that are justly deemed as iconic. As it's my pleasure to introduce you to such objects, it would be remiss of me not to feature our outstanding collection of ancient Chinese bronzes. Conveyed in these exceptional Chinese bronzes are centuries of technological advancement, tremendous social and political change, and cultural and artistic achievement. Let's focus for a moment on this extraordinary ritual vessel dating from the early Western Zhou dynasty, circa 1050 to 975 BCE. The beauty of its decoration with elaborate Taochi patterns and animal motifs rendered in different levels of relief is enough to recommend it as a breathtaking object. And yet this vessel is most famous for its lengthy cast inscription of no fewer than 187 characters. This text, one of the longest from the early Zhou period, is repeated inside the vessel in the lid. Although cast, the inscription resembles the rhythm and flow of calligraphy. A court scribe named Ling might have composed the text himself. If so, he could have been following a family tradition, since he was a younger relative of Da, who was responsible for another bronze vessel in the Freer collection. Namely, this Fangding ritual food cauldron with Taochi and serpent motifs, as well as an inscription that associates the scribe Da with a key figure in early Zhou history, the Grand Protector or Taibao, Duke Shi of Shao. According to the inscription, Da received a white horse for his service. Inscriptions and shapes, be it a vessel or a bell, help us gain insight into the functions that these objects may have fulfilled, oftentimes ritualistic and commemorative. But even aided by the unexpected trove of information afforded by a lengthy inscription, will the 21st century museum visitor truly understand and relate to these temporally and semantically distinct objects? To encourage meaningful discovery and foster deep understanding, our museum creates multimedia experiences for our visitors, both physical and digital, activating the power of our collection objects through stories and performances, music and conversation. For example, American composers responded to the sounds of ancient Chinese bells. And musicians played in our galleries instruments from different Asian cultures, speaking to their common origins and felicitous effects when brought together in musical union. For example, in September of last year, we welcomed 2 musicians playing instruments that originated in Central Asia, where the Sogdians were prominent traders along the medieval Silk Road. The pear-shaped, bent-necked, and wood-faced lute traveled from its home in present-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan to China, where it became the pipa, and to the Arab world, where it evolved into the oud. Pipa virtuoso Gao Hong and oud master Essam Rafa brought the instruments together for a compelling duet. I hope you'll enjoy a minute or two of this contemplative and engaging performance. More recently, we launched a number of new online series such as Look and Listen and Objects We Love, pairing image and sound to enhance how our visitors experience our collections, even from the comfort and safety of their own homes. I invite you to watch a few excerpts from recent episodes featuring more iconic objects from our museum. In this excerpt, you'll watch virtuoso Kia Tabassian perform and discuss music for the sitar, an ancient Iranian stringed instrument, alongside works of art from the 12th to the 16th century, showing Persian music in a variety of contexts. All this as explained by Masameh Farhad, our chief curator, and the Ebrahimi family curator of Persian, Arab, and Turkish art.
In this painting from a manuscript also by the poet Jami, called The Radiance of Light, you see such a scene taking place in a beautifully tiled pavilion in a garden. You can even feel the breeze. A couple is seated in the pavilion and the musicians sit below. Take a closer look and you realize that all the musicians are actually women. On the left, you have a sitar player and a percussionist. But the sitar player doesn't seem to be focusing too much on her music, as she is distracted by a passing handsome youth. On the right, there are 2 other women, and they must be singers judging by their hand gestures. In front of the musicians, you have trays with refreshments and tall golden bottles, which are most likely filled with wine. In Iran, as in other parts of the world, music was not only meant for enjoyment, but it was also intended to transport you to another level of consciousness. And that is why Wine and music are often paired in many of these paintings. Remarkably, a number of musical notations from the 16th century have actually survived, and Kia is going to play one of them for us.
In the following excerpt, you'll enjoy a performance for the Japanese stringed instrument known as the koto by virtuoso player and award-winning composer Yumi Kurosawa, while looking at beloved work of Japanese art from our collections, introduced by Sonia Kohlmann-Ernsthoff, our audience engagement strategist.
Here is Yumi's arrangement of a popular American tune, George Gershwin's Summertime. As you listen, you'll be able to see a 17th century Japanese screen from our collections attributed to Tawaraya Sosetsu, a follower of the celebrated master Sodatsu. The screen depicts lush summer flowers growing under a mimosa tree, expertly depicted in washes of ink and pigment against a gold-leafed background. What makes it possible to pair the 17th century Japanese painting with a tune by George Gershwin? The summer theme, of course, but more importantly, it is Yumi's rendition on the koto, bridging cultures as well as bridging tradition and innovation.
The next program I invite you to enjoy focuses on the Chinese musical instrument called the qin, which for centuries has been most often played in solitude or with a like-minded friend or two. Our guides will be the qin expert Belle Jung, who will perform on an instrument that dates from 1640, and Keith Wilson, our curator of ancient Chinese art, who will introduce Chinese paintings that relate to qin playing and provide an inside look at the oldest qin instrument in our museum's collection, complete with insights into recent discoveries about its fabrication in the year 1009.
Now, I'd like to share a very special instrument in the Freer Gallery of Art collection. Its undulating profile is notably different from more typical designs that have angular notches along the two sides. On its upper face, you see the 7 strings pass over the bridge, located at the player's right, and wrap around the end of the instrument at the left. The 13 circular hui, marking the harmonic nodes, are inlaid with gold. When the instrument is turned over, the bottom reveals the 7 fine jade tuning pegs beneath the bridge and 2 short jade feet near the opposite end. You also see the 2 openings of the sound box and a series of important inscriptions. The 4 characters carved at the neck name the instrument, reading Ku Mu Long Yin, or Weathered Wood, the Dragon's Roar. This name has Chan Buddhist connotations.
Last but not least, before I move on to a different aspect of our institution, I'm pleased to invite you to watch an excerpt from a different program, Objects We Love, in which Deborah Diamond, our curator for South and Southeast Asian art, explores Indian classical music through a spectacular 16th century Indian folio painting entitled Kedar Ragini.
First, let's take a close look at the painting. A full moon, a starry night, a lush grove, a domed shrine, 2 ascetics, and a single peacock that signifies unrequited love. The beautiful young ascetic on the right, Kedar, is a Hindu yogi, his body covered in purifying white ash, and his jata, his dreadlocks, piled atop his head. He's seated in lotus posture, Padmasana, and he's playing a lute, and he's singing Kedar. In fact, he's singing Kedar along with a visitor who has arrived by foot, slipped off his wood sandals, left them respectfully at the edge of the platform, and settled down for the evening, which we can tell from the little crutch under his arm and the band around his legs. Those are 2 technologies that India invented that help you sit on the ground for a long time. And he also is singing Kedar while holding prayer beads. This bearded visitor is a Sufi, a Muslim mystic, and the yogi is a Hindu. And if we dig a little further, we learn that the painter, Sheikh Hatim, is Muslim, and that the patron is a Hindu ruler. And we dig even more, and we learn that the patron, the ruler of Bundi in Rajasthan, at that time when it was painted, was governing in Chunar in Uttar Pradesh, and he's governing there under the imprimatur of a Muslim ruler, the Mughal Emperor Akbar, who himself was a great lover of Indian classical music, which emerged and flourished in a Hindu context. When this painting was brought back to Bundi, its yogi and Sufi composition became so popular that it was painted again and again for 200 years. This was a period in which yogis mixed freely with Sufis, in which Muslims painted for Hindus and Hindus painted for Muslims, and it was understood that cultural and spiritual experiences could be and were enriched by interactions across religious borders. These worlds, today ever more obscured by communal tensions, accommodated and even celebrated difference. It's understood here that it's understood in this painting that the Sufi is yearning for God, for Allah, the yogi yearning for Shiva, for Ishvara, and the Bundi ruler who commissioned the painting, on hearing the raga and looking at the painting, was longing for an absent beloved.
As it may become apparent to you, I am passionate about our museum's educational mission. We provide our visitors with the tools of visual literacy that they need to engage with our diverse and exceptional collections in all sorts of different ways. In our educational offerings, from docent tours to online interactives, we aim to generate enthusiasm about discovering an object in its complexity, to foster curiosity about historical context, and to nurture cross-cultural understanding and even empathy. As we continue to grow as the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art, we're partnering with innovative organizations whose values and methods match ours. Particularly, we're proud to collaborate with Smart History, the world's most visited art history resource. I hope you'll enjoy a few segments from recent video conversations between Smart History's directors, Beth Harris and Stephen Zucker, and our curators, as they team up to explore iconic objects from the Freer and Sackler collections. First, let's enjoy a conversation with Frank Feltens, the Japan Foundation Assistant Curator of Japanese Art. Conversation about a pair of Hokusai masterpieces.
We're here in the storage room at the Freer Gallery of Art looking at two exceptional paintings by a Japanese artist that we mostly know through his woodblock prints. But here we're looking at his paintings, and paintings made at the very end of his life.
So we're looking at a diptych by the famous artist Katsushika Hokusai.
Hokusai lived to be a very old man.
Hokusai writes about his desire to live even up until the age of 110. This wish appears in 100 Views of Mount Fuji. He writes, I started sketching everything around me at age 6 and wishes to live up until the age of 110 when he thought his ability would reach such a level that every line that he paints comes to life.
He's such a prolific artist. He's produced so much that any other artist would have felt so accomplished.
As he saw his end approaching, he experienced this final burst of creativity, and the medium that he chose was painting.
And so we can think about these as expressing something more personal for Hokusai.
Let's talk about the woodcutter first. This may be based on a No play in which a imperial emissary was sent out to find the spring of eternal life. The emissary comes across a woodcutter and asks him, have you heard of such a spring? And the woodcutter sends him to that spring, and the emissary can return with the happy news to the emperor.
So this is a folk tale, and we can identify that this particular woodcutter is likely from that folk tale because of the gourd that he has around his waist, which he would have used to collect the water from the spring of eternal life.
But in combination with a fisherman, another theory was also raised. There is an ancient Chinese story about a woodcutter and a fisherman conversing about the meaning of life, because both of them are men of nature, in tune with the world around them. So they become a symbol for a perfect balance between the world, the cosmos, and a life.
Next, I invite you to watch part of a conversation with Stephen Ali, Associate Curator for Chinese Painting and Calligraphy, on a spectacular painting by Bada Shanren.
Bada Shanren was born Prince of the Ming Dynasty. When he was 18, the dynasty fell to invaders from the north who founded the Qing Dynasty, which was the last imperial dynasty in China. It had an enormous effect on the young man, who fled and eventually decided to join the Buddhist church.
And because we know that he was a part of the royal family, we know that he would have been versed in Confucian philosophy and aware of Taoist philosophy as well, but he enters into a Buddhist monastery and he spends 30 years there.
When he left the monastery, the story goes that he was found in the marketplace babbling, had ripped off his monk's robes and lit them on fire. He reemerged in the 1670s, 80s as an artist, and that's when he took the name Bada Shanren. He was quite an eccentric fellow, maybe not quite as eccentric as some of the accounts would have it. The large hanging scroll is from his most mature period. Later in life, he takes one of his names as the Lotus Garden. The lotus has particular symbolism in the Buddhist faith as something pure that arises from the muck of the lake and yet comes up pristine and beautiful and flowers. And that is a metaphor for many different aspects of life, including religious awakening. And probably of all the flowers that Bada paints, the lotus is one that he comes back to again and again.
Although they're constructed just of 2 strokes of ink, they create this full volume and a sense of lightness and preciousness that recalls the beauty of a lotus blossom with remarkable fidelity.
He's very calligraphic in his approach and in his use of ink and his use of the brush. He specializes for a bit in birds and fish. You often see them where the pupil is rolled up in the socket to show the whites of the eyes, and that is the case in the large hanging scroll, where you have one duck up on high, one duck below. You wonder, is the one below looking to the one above? But this comes from the idea that in early depictions, to show the white of the eyes was to express anger. So that anger is interpreted as being his anger at the loss of the Ming dynasty, the loss of the dynasty into which he was born.
I'm just as delighted to present to you an excerpt from another Smart History conversation with Emma Stein, Assistant Curator of South and Southeast Asian Art, on the iconic Chola Dynasty bronze sculpture of the Queen Sembayan Mahadevi as the goddess Parvati.
In India, gods all have bodies. They have a formless form, but they also have what's known as a manifestation, a kind of embodied presence that's represented like a beautiful, perfected human being.
It makes sense to show a divine figure as ideally beautiful, as perfect.
Look at her slender waist, the way that her clothing clings around her legs and gives her this intensely physical form. It's also a royal image in that she has all of this jewelry. She wears a necklace, a sacred thread around her torso, armlets, bangles, rings on fingers and toes.
She stands in a position that seems relaxed and confident, and there's something very serene about her expression.
She's standing in this gently swayed position known as a tribhanga or three-bend pose.
Here we are in the Chola period in the south of India.
During this time, this kind of idealization of the human form to depict a deity in bronze reached an incredible level of expertise and popularity.
So the Chola dynasty is known for commissioning these bronze images of deities, and we find them prominently placed in their temples.
Just before the year 1000, one queen, Sembayan Mahadevi, was responsible for converting many temples from brick and wood into the more durable and more costly material of stone.
So Sembayan's very pious, very devout, and commissioning and endowing temples at a scale which was unprecedented. We know from written sources that Sembayan's birthday was celebrated in the village that was named for her.
There is an inscription in Sembayan Mahadevi on a beautiful temple that was sponsored by the queen herself that mentions provisions for using a portrait sculpture of the queen donated to the temple by Rajaraja I.
I do hope you enjoyed the selection of our programming, which has highlighted these splendid objects in our collections. Before I conclude, I'd like to introduce two other crucial dimensions of our work at the Freer and Sackler galleries: our conservation and scientific research, and our scholarship and publications. In both areas, I am very proud of our distinguished history, and I'm just as excited about the groundbreaking research and cutting-edge innovation that recommend our museum as a leading voice in the study and care of Asian art. Long before the Freer Gallery of Art opened its doors to the public in 1923, museum founder Charles Lang Freer regularly brought specialists from Japan to care for the Asian artworks on view in his Detroit mansion. Today, as a leading center in the United States for the care and scientific study of the arts of Asia, our museum's Department of Conservation and Scientific Research continues the work begun in the East Asian Painting Conservation Studio in 1923 and the Technical Laboratory in 1951. We use a combination of traditional and contemporary methods for the conservation and scientific study of works of art. Our scientists and conservators strive to improve methods of preservation, advance education and conservation practices, and conduct research into artist materials such as pigments used in Asian paintings. They collaborate closely with the museum's other departments to safeguard the collections, ensure the proper display and storage of objects, and they also contribute to the ever-growing understanding and appreciation of Asian art in America and around the world. Last, but certainly not least, our museum has long enjoyed a national and international reputation, especially amongst those knowledgeable in Asian arts and culture, for its research and publications. In fact, the exceptional output of our scholarly research, the scholarship that we undertake, our interpretation, it really exemplifies the position that we hold in North America as the mothership, really, for advancing knowledge on the arts and cultures of Asia. The Library of the Freer Gallery of Art and Arthur M. Sackler Gallery originated as a collection of 4,000 monographs, periodical issues, off-prints, and sales catalogs that have been assembled by Charles Lang Freer, and which he donated to the Smithsonian Institution as part of his gift to the nation. With more than 86,000 volumes, the library is now considered one of the finest repositories of Asian art resources in the United States. Since it opened in the Freer Gallery in 1923, the library's purpose has been to foster and stimulate study of the artistic traditions and cultures of the peoples of Asia. It maintains the highest standards for collecting materials relevant to the study of Asian art and culture, and it does so through an active program of purchases, gifts, and exchanges. In July 1987, the library moved to its new home in the Arthur M. Sackler Gallery. Upon this extraordinary foundation, the museum advances scholarship through local and international symposia and conferences, through the publications of our staff, and notably through the pioneering interdisciplinary journal Ars Orientalis, which is published annually in collaboration with the University of Michigan. The journal originated from the ideals of two visionary men, museum founder Charles Lang Freer and Mehmed Aoulou, a Near Eastern art curator at the Detroit Institute of Arts and the first professor of Islamic art in the United States at the University of Michigan. Today, Ars Orientalis focuses on issues of encounter and interaction and aims to redefine and cross boundaries, both spatial and temporal, in the study of Asian arts. Most recently, Ars Orientalis launched its first entirely digital volume, offering online features and making scholarship available even more widely to global communities of scholars and learners. Thank you for your interest in the Freer Gallery of Art and the Arthur M. Sackler, the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. I do hope you've enjoyed this virtual experience of our museum, and I hope that it's stimulated your curiosity to discover the marvelous world of Asian arts and cultures. In our era of global interdependence and change, there is a new urgency in preserving art and culture, and for fostering an understanding of the historical, cultural, and artistic diversities of Asian cultures and societies. Our museum endeavors to nurture such understanding through our diverse portfolio of offerings, from exhibitions to performances to scholarly publications. As these canteens have shown us, our museum's exceptional objects come with compelling stories, stories that await their unlocking by intellectual curiosity, to be enjoyed with understanding, respect, and empathy. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to welcoming you to the Freer and Sackler, either in person or virtually in the future. Be well.